If you said A players and top talent, if you're not at a conference and you're not on stage, you just sound weird. So when it comes to marketing and advertising to candidates, we need to.
In this episode, I'm speaking to Brandon Jeffs. Brando is currently the Director of People and Talent at TLDR. In this episode, we're going to talk about why he thinks A players don't actually exist, how to apply methodologies from other domains to recruitment, his bias towards early stage organizations and some advice for recruiters within them, and where he thinks most people go wrong with employer branding. Let's get into it. Brandon, thanks for joining me.
Hey, what's up, Joe? Great to be here.
Have you seen the new LinkedIn announcement about the AI hiring assistant? And if so, what do you think?
Yeah, I saw the announcement, haven't seen it. My understanding is they rolled it out to a certain select few of their audience. It's interesting. I think the high level question is LinkedIn a recruiting product? They're a B2B SaaS sales product. At the end of the day, when it comes to LinkedIn being a resource for recruiters, there has been a lot of criticism, complaints, and lack of reception to our practitioner feedback over the years. So we'll see what this thing yields.
I think what's interesting about it is they've rolled it out to some customers to test it now, but just reading some of the announcements on LinkedIn, it's going to be another 12 months until it's available to everyone, which in another 12 months, everything could have changed again, and there could be all sorts of other developments in AI and tooling.
100%. And one of the pieces that is interesting when it comes to buying recruiting tech tools is the speed in which these softwares are being released to market. Myself being a recruiter, when I'm building a stack, I'm not locking into any annual contracts for any software. I took my LinkedIn spend to zero in the last few years. I've got a lean stack that works. And that's something I'm hearing from my friends when I talk to other sourcers, other recruiters, whether they're in-house, agency, fractional. Yeah, no one's locking down annual contracts. The tech is moving too fast.
I think maybe that's what they're even trying to do by announcing it so early, is saying don't get tied in with an external tool or don't move away from LinkedIn because we're going to ship this. Yeah, let's see what happens. Let's dive in then. We were going to talk quite a bit about startup hiring. I think we both have a passion for startups. One of your posts recently, you basically said the term A players and top talent, which is used on, I reckon 90% of job descriptions for startups basically mean nothing. Tell me how you think about this.
When I think about a job description, since you talk about being written there, it's like, what is a job description? It's an advertisement. It's a piece of marketing material. And great companies often have two documents, the external advertisement and then the internal job description you get during onboarding. One of the things I've seen is we have these phrases and these terms that are just used in business, particularly in written word, that we don't say verbally when we talk to one another. Like if you said like A players and top talent, if you're not at a conference and you're not on stage, like you just sound weird. So when it comes to marketing and advertising to candidates, we just need to be authentic. We need to communicate how we talk. And a lot of that is speaking to a singular audience. Great copywriters do this. They identify their exact persona and they speak directly to them in a singular way. A lot of job descriptions that leverage terms like A players or top talent, those are speaking to a wide audience, and it's written through the frame of like, oh, I got to get this job description live. I need to get 400 applicants so I can screen 20 and ship 10 to the hiring manager. So that's why I think about communicating to an audience of one and being more intentional with our word.
Even outside of job descriptions with our general copywriting, we can fall into this trap of wanting to appeal to everyone, right? And we kind of end up appealing sort of to no one by doing that. And yeah, me thinking about when I was applying for jobs, I was never sat there like, I'm an A player. Maybe I'm not an A player. Maybe that's why. But I think instead, if I was a software engineer, I'd be like, yeah, I'm really experienced in JavaScript, and this is the kind of language I'm going to look for, right? Versus describing myself as an A player, and I'm certainly not going to search for that on a job board.
And also, it's this idea of an A player compared to what? What is the rubric and what is the statistical standard? And how is A players degrade over time? if you only hire A players, what does that mean for the grading system of A players? Is it A players compared to the rest of the candidate pool? I'm a big believer in the Pareto principle, which is the 80-20 rule. And in an organization, you need mid-level performers. You need average folks. You need rank and file people that chop wood, carry water, get stuff done. I think apt business leaders like this phrase of A players or top talent because they're striving to be the best and communicating to the best. Companies like to say they're the best at X, the first to do Y. But at the end of the day, that's just not the case operationally.
Let's talk about another couple of phrases then. So I really love it when people take principles from one domain and apply them to another. This is something I've heard you talk about a couple of times, both pattern matching and first principles thinking and applying that to recruitment. Maybe for anyone who hasn't heard of those in the normal domain, what are they and how are you thinking about them in recruitment?
Yeah, maybe that's just a testament of being a tech bro and hanging out with too many engineering leaders and founders. But it goes back to why and how we say things. I think first principles thinking is how products are built. Software product is built through solving a problem from scratch. And then the idea of pattern matching is applying the knowledge, applying iteration, A/B testing, using that data to inform either future forecasts or future behaviors. From a recruiting perspective, pattern matching is something I'm seeing a lot with fractional folks who have jumped out of in-house roles or they've navigated rifts and they're able to provide tremendous value to businesses, particularly in early stage startups. Many recruiters right now are de-risking their financial security by going out on their own as a fractional recruiter, which is a fascinating concept altogether. And what I see is recruiters niching down. So for example, if you worked at a design software, spent 2 years growing that team through those hyper growth days when headcount multiples replaced a lot of things on the financial metrics of a business. And we were going around saying like, oh, we 2x, 10x headcount. I feel like 2021 was just this brutal velocity of hiring. Well, if you hired 100, 200, 300 folks back in 2021 at a company that took off, well, now there's design software companies that are trying to grow from 10 to 50 people now. And if you can have that niche experience to identify candidate market fit for that founder from your past experience, that's how I think about pattern matching in recruiting. And then from there, you can break that into what business groups, what types of roles, what are the behaviors. And that's starting to talk a little bit about talent intelligence and potentially even skills-based hiring.
Quick pause to talk about one of our partners, Pinpoint. Pinpoint provide an applicant tracking system that's easy to use, looks great, and is packed with helpful features. However, after working with Pinpoint for over a year now, my favorite thing about them is actually the team itself. They built this flexible software and they're committed to molding that to every single customer they work with to fit their hiring context and specific needs. I'm also a big fan of their free recruitment trends tool where they give away benchmarks from their customer data. I'll link to that below. Back to the interview. Love it. Yeah, I love the first principles piece as well, right? Which is basically about boiling things down to their simplest form. I've seen this done by a few good recruiters. One example is on the intake meeting where you're trying to understand the requirements, but the real reason for the requirements. And a couple of senior recruiters who are on our platform, they suggest that you just keep asking why. And it might sound a bit weird or annoying at first, but a hiring manager says, we need this requirement. You ask why. They say, we have this problem in the business. You ask why. And after a few times asking why, you get to the real cause of the problem and why you actually need to make this hire, which you can then feed into your search and your sourcing and your screening.
Yeah, biggest bang for buck interview question with a candidate is why. Ask a candidate that why tree, and you'll get to a really great insight about a candidate. And I love that you mentioned the intake meeting. It is a great way to focus on outcomes of a role. Hiring managers, when they give a draft of a JD, like 9 times out of 10, it's going to come over with number of years experience and nice to have elements of a talent persona. But if you can go back and focus on the outcomes of the behaviors for the role and what it means for the product, growth, or financial story that you're trying to tell by bringing on headcount, that's going to get you to a more successful outcome.
Let's talk specifically hiring for startups, Ben. As I mentioned earlier, we've both got a place in our heart, should we say, for startup organizations. Why for you are they so attractive? And second question, what advice do you have for other startup recruiters who are maybe slightly earlier in their career?
Maybe I'm a glutton for punishment, or maybe I have a massive ego. I just want to make an impact on this world in the time that I'm here. Life is far too short not to work on cool problems with interesting people, and startups are full of interesting people. If the first principles thinking of hiring is to get to a handshake, let's throw everything else we know about recruitment and our preconceived notions out the window. There's no recruiting jail and there's no recruiting emergency room. If I can't have a little bit of fun at work, I'm probably not going to do that. I've had a variety of jobs. Recruiting for me is almost a second career. I spent my 20s thinking that I was going to be in the restaurant and hospitality industry. I followed my passion. As a millennial that came up into the workforce post-Great Recession in the US, I took that advice. I followed my passion. Recruiting is really humble work. And if we're just trying to get to a handshake, it's something that I can show up and deliver every day. More granularly, at your question around startups, for 10 years, I wanted to work at Google. Yeah, you and everybody else, bro. In the 2010s, Google was the place to be. We all had Laszlo box work rules on our desks, whether it was the playbook or not. And I wanted to be the best, and the best worked at Google. When I finally had my Google match, I had an opportunity to say yes to that dream. But I realized that wasn't actually what I enjoyed doing. And I had this goal to achieve what I thought was the best. But when it came down to the role itself, it was niching down and just hiring software engineers on Google Cloud day in, day out. I love other areas of talent acquisition, like employer brand, like rec ops and analytics. I love investing in post-hire outcomes and having relationships to develop and mentor teams after we hire them, after we get to that handshake. I've often been a team of one. In the last few years, I've spent building out talent engines 0 to 1 strategically and tactically because I love staying close to the work, even as my skills gain more relevancy in the market. I love solving problems. And when I look back at my career, every job I've had has been solving some sort of problem from a first principles process, whether it's employer brand, digital transformation, implementing leading edge technology, working for an ethical AI, HR tech startup. I just love getting into a problem set and being curious. So that's my advice for early stage recruiters or recruiters that may be feeling lost. Create a personal mission statement. My personal mission statement is to empower the employee-employer relationship in the future of work. That evolved from the candidate-employer relationship as my role evolved because now I lead a people and talent function. So I would go out, be curious, find a mentor, but also give back. Spend a third of your time with folks that are 10, 15 years ahead of you. Spend a third of your time with your peers and a third of your time with the emerging generation. We're also recruiters. Pick up the phone. Give a recruiter a call. In the last year, I've intentionally built relationships with folks in this space, and the results far exceeded my expectations of what that would bring me in my life. I'm able to approach recruiting each day, log on out here in my basement with joy and bringing some humility and light to the process, because at the end of the day, when we're trying to get to that handshake yes, it's a massive decision that a candidate is going to make. So we need to have a lot of empathy for what the candidates experience.
You're definitely the first recruiter I've spoken with their own mission statement, which I absolutely love, by the way. But I think, yeah, the opportunity working for a startup is to build that like T-shaped skill set, right? Like you might be brought in to be a sourcer and source more candidates, but you're almost certainly going to get the opportunity to work in different areas of talent acquisition and maybe even different areas of the business as well, which you just wouldn't get at a larger org. So I think you become a really well-rounded employee by spending a few years at a startup.
Take it a step further from T-shaped to pie-shaped or comb-shaped. And what I mean by pie-shaped or comb-shaped is being able to go deep on a few areas of the business. I've had roles as a marketer. I've had roles in HR. And when I build out that career pixelation. Shout out to Chris Long for coining that term. What I want to create is value to the business. And a way to de-risk that from a financial security perspective is take risks that develop your skill set, but identify the intersection points in a Venn diagram. That's actually a tool that I use when I coach mentees or earlier stage employees. I think I was 3 or 4 years in my career in HR, and I created a Venn diagram for the intersection of HR, recruiting, and marketing. And I identified the skills needed and areas to grow. And that served as a way marker for identifying the roles and jobs not to take. And if I have that Venn diagram, I think I've even got it floating around somewhere in a backpack, I'll be able to know what types of risks I can take in my career that have big picture, high leverage outcomes.
You spoke about marketing and recruitment there. Let's speak about the marketing side of recruitment. So, quote from one of your posts here: the employer brand. Most companies get this one wrong. Where are they going wrong and how do we fix it?
I think it goes back to how we communicate with people. And this is my blind spot and my bias. I've only worked for small organizations. Even post-IPO hyper growth corporate work, we only had 300 folks at our corporate office, despite being a company of 4,000. So when I think about the employer brand and the recruitment process, it's really scrappy. I like to break a lot of rules, do cool things, make memorable experiences, do things that don't scale. So when I say most companies get this wrong, I'm saying this through my own corner I can't see around. I know employer brand for large organizations is huge. What I mean by that is the employer brand is about how we make people feel about the people and the company. Marketing are the activities to drive conversion at a certain stage in the funnel. And you can think about the candidate journey as a funnel. And there are very tactical marketing campaigns that exist at all of those stages. But I'm thinking about brand from a first principles thought. And for me, it's about how somebody makes me feel. Do I want to invest in this company? Do they share my values? Are the values that are on the website actually the operating principles of the company? And what are some of the cultural norms? So that's what I mean by that.
Tying to another post of yours, like you mentioned community being a big factor. Are you thinking community within part of the employer brand, or is that almost a separate point?
Community is a funny word. I think community has been tossed around to a fault too much in the last few years. It definitely is like community with a capital C, capitalism community in certain SaaS ecosystems where a software company builds a community so that they can grow super users. They can then leverage that community as outsourced third-party customer support, as we've seen in big tech. You can use it to leverage secondary revenue streams as an affiliate channel. You can do a lot of things with communities. People like community as a phrase. And one of the reasons it's been popular in our vernacular is we went through a pandemic. This is a crazy, holy heck moment for humanity. We were in our homes, isolated from one another. Humans are a social species. Whether you're introverted or extroverted, we rely on other people. So when we got out of the pandemic, it was like, hooray, let's go build some community again. So I like to look at like, what is the definition of community and why are we gathering? Social media also has an impact on community. And I think that is the great experiment that we learned is a lie. Connectivity plus commonality does not equal community. Community and the sociological impacts and benefits of it come through connection. And that has to be at the human level, rooted through human emotions, not just because we're plugged into a gig of bandwidth in our homes.
In that sense, is like the value of the recruiter as well. We were talking about AI and automation at the start of the interview, right? And that is the thing that's going to be really hard to replicate and take away.
And then there's talent communities. So like actual folks out there from a sourcing perspective that are building community for individuals that particularly are from underrepresented, historically undervalued, marginalized group, or strategically excluded groups. So if you're a recruiter and you're looking to drive a more diverse pipeline, go spend $5,000 sponsoring a hackathon for a women in engineering group. So that's how I think about talent communities as a recruiter. I've always been a supporter of these specific groups, and the best way to be a supporter is cutting a check.
It makes a ton of sense as well, right? Like you just get access to, you get leverage and you get access, especially as a small organization, to a group that you wouldn't otherwise be able to access. So I think it's a win-win for everyone.
Back to brand, you have to be authentic. If you just give lip service to these communities, like you're not going to drive pipeline. If your website says one thing, but your interviewers' behaviors say another, you're going to see candidate drop off. So it really comes back to brand being how we treat one another.
I'm thinking out loud on the parallels for the way B2B sales is going. And again, it's very much like B2B sales is changing. It's very community influencer driven. But if then you get to the sales rep and they don't represent the values that you're showing in these communities, it's not going to match, right? Awesome. I think we're about there for time. So Brando, thanks so much for joining me.
It's a pleasure. Happy to do it anytime, Joe.